Hi everyone, welcome to Moving to Australia podcast. In today's episode, we are talking to a friend of ours, Aadil Abbas, who is a chartered accountant and a partner with a firm Own Financial Planning based in Sydney. Aadil is originally from Bombay, and we are thrilled he's joining us on the podcast to talk about his life experience about making the move to Australia. Hi Aadil, good morning. Welcome to our show.
Hi, Arun. Great to be here, and thanks for inviting me. Looking forward to our chat.
So Aadil, when did you decide to move out of India and what brought about the decision?
Oh, wow, Arun, that's you're going to take me back a long time away, and I think yeah, it's actually been 20 years since I've been in Australia now. So it was 2004 when I decided to move out of India. And my decision at the time was pretty much I think, a decision which a lot of your listeners may potentially resonate with. Is it was based upon the fact that I wanted to kind of go overseas, get an overseas qualification, which would be internationally recognized, broaden my horizon, live overseas for some time, and get some life, build some life skills, live independently, things like that. But yeah, that was that brought about the decision.
And was Australia the first country that came to your mind when you decided to leave India?
It wasn't the first country which came to mind, Arun, but it was amongst definitely in my top three choices. One thing I was very clear on, which may sound very interesting, is the fact that I was very clear that I would not be going to the US. Now, that was very clear in my head. I won't go into the reasons why. I have my own reasons as to why I decided not to go to the US. I wanted to be going to a country which was part of the Commonwealth. You may call me a monarchist. And things like that. You may call me that. But no, my first choice actually was the UK. And then I also had Canada and Australia as part of my list, as part of the countries I was considering. The UK is essentially for me then just became like when I did my research into like studying in the UK and the institutions I wanted to study, it just became prohibitive from a cost perspective. Being a chartered accountant, I think in numbers, so I had to do the numbers myself for my own decision, and the UK was just not, it just wasn't adding up for me. Then after that, actually, the decision between Canada and Australia was much more simplistic. I looked at Canada, I understood about the Canadian sort of winters. I looked at Australia, looked at all the seasons over here. I said, Australia it is. I didn't want to be freezing in the Canadian winter. And the fact that I got admission into a very reputed institution in Australia, like I got admission into the MBA program at the Australian Graduate School of Management at UNSW, which was and I believe is still the number one MBA program in Australia. That kind of firmed up my sort of decision as well that I would move to Australia.
Aadil, what was your first impression of the country and how long did it take you to settle in?
Oh, Irene, first impression of the country. Trying to jog my memory on this one because a lot of these impressions now I just don't even think about. But I think the first impression I had was how informal the Australian sort of culture is, and how in terms of both in at personal relationship level and at in the work relationships as well. So in Australia, the language used is very informal. Does not mean they're not showing you respect, but I came from a society where hierarchy and using the right honorifics like sir and madam was very important. When I started using that in Australia in my early days, people would look at me and say, "What are you on? Which era are you from? We're not in the 18th century here." So that
Had you traveled here before, like on a holiday or anything?
No, never. Hadn't been to Australia before. It was pretty much based on just internet research and the movies and the telly and things like that. But no, really had no exposure to Australia physically. Had ever been to Australia prior to that. It was based on just uh, third party third party anecdotes essentially. So yeah, it was like, yeah, the informal, I would say, culture really struck me. That is something which kind of I kind of remember that was something very interesting for me to adapt to. Secondly, just the relaxed pace of life, like everything was relaxed in Australia. Nobody ever seemed to be in a rush. Nothing got done in a rush, which was interesting coming from a country where people are always in a rush. Everybody wants to get somewhere very quickly and do it fast and things like that. And I initially it was a bit difficult to kind of just adapt to the slower pace of life. But then I started to appreciate it as well, that, in life, sometimes you just got to take things slowly, and, you don't have to be rushed. There are times when you need to be rushing, but that doesn't apply to every aspect of your life. So really that relaxed pace of life was something which really struck me. And then finally, I think the third thing which struck me was the fact that a lot of Australians do live in the present. There was not too much anxiety about the future. And I attribute that to having now lived here for all these years, for the past, I would say 2 decades. I attribute that to the fact that I think Australia is one of the few developed nations which has struck a very good balance between being a capitalist, I would say, society, and having a socialist mindset as well. So we strike a very good balance over there, and which allows people to kind of work hard, get ahead in life, but also know that there is a safety net. And I think whilst when we all live in Australia, we can tend to underappreciate that about the balance which this country has struck, being fair and being also giving you opportunities.
Now, you mentioned that you're a chartered accountant. You went to uni here at New South
Yes.
Wales. So, what was life like at University of New South Wales?
Oh, life at UNSW was amazing, Arun, because it really kind of ticked a lot of the boxes, and that's one of the reasons why I decided to also kind of come to UNSW, is because I'd done some research on the student body at the time, and the student body in UNSW did attract students from all over the world. They did provide a very diverse international student body, and that was important for me because I really wanted to make sure that I got a diverse, like I got to kind of study with people from different parts of the world, learn about different cultures, different experiences. And so no, life at UNSW was great. It was a good way to assimilate into the country as well, learn the lingo. Like I can tell you a very I can tell you a very I can tell you a very funny story around that. Is like, I was at uni in my first week, and somebody asked me after the sort of lecture saying, "How are you going?" And my response was, "By bus." And they cracked up because they were just asking me, "How am I?" And I did not know that. I just thought "how are you going" meant, I thought they were asking me a grammatically incorrect question. I was about to say to him, "It is actually how are you going, right? It's not what's how you going." So uni was a great way for me to learn about just learn about the country, the culture, and just assimilate, give myself some time to assimilate.
Yeah, it was like, did you come here to die? No, 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 I come here to live.
I come here to live.
At what point did you realize that Australia is where you want to settle down for the rest of your life?
Interesting question, Arun. I think this one is actually a bit more psychological, in the sense that I did not realize this when I was in Australia. My realization that Australia is going to be home happened when I actually went back to Bombay for the first time after having lived in Australia for 2 years. And for some reason, when I landed in Bombay and spent some time in Bombay on that first trip back home, I felt a sense of disconnect with India at the time. And I think that has got a lot to do with the fact that I kind of started thinking about my own personal identity. And in Australia for the last 2 years before going to India, I was an independent person. I had my own identity in Australia, which is not linked to my family, not linked to any particular, community, sect, religion, blah, blah, blah. In India, you tend to be known by your family, and tend to be known based on which community you're part of and things like that. Like, there are labels attached to you. In Australia, I was label free. So I could be whoever I wanted to be. And that sense of freedom which I felt in Australia, and I went back to India, I felt that there was a little bit of that whole old behaviors, really, like the way people interacted with me was different. And because they were trying to put me into a certain structure. So at that time, I thought, you know what? I think Australia will give me the opportunity to really realize my, I would say, potential, become a man in my own right, to be able to put it that way.
Right. Okay, Adil. So you came here and you studied at one of the top business colleges in the world, Australian Graduate School of Management. So
Yes.
congratulations.
Thank you.
That's a great achievement. So I want to ask a few questions about your visa at
Mm-hmm.
that time. I think it was
Sure.
a visa, student visa, the subclass was different,
Yes.
573 or something.
Wouldn't
Now,
remember the subclass number, but it was a student visa, I can tell you that.
yes, and then on that visa, did
Uh-huh.
you have any condition were you allowed to work when you were on the student visa? How many hours were you allowed to work and did you work?
If I remember correctly, I could work 20 hours on that student visa at the time. So I was allowed to work 20 hours. I couldn't take up a full-time role, but I could do
Mhm.
20 hours of work.
And were you able to find work? Did you work just for pocket money or for some other reason?
I did some casual gigs linked to my programs because I was in a very full-time intensive MBA program, which is
Mm,
a full-time 18-month program. And to be honest, Amitava, I did not even have the time.
right.
I would say prepared myself that even if I don't work, I should be okay
Hmm.
from a financial perspective. But as
Hmm.
I went through the business, as my like the first, if you think of term one and term one, term two, it was just so much of just adapting, assimilating, and all of
Mm,
that stuff happening that there was no time to kind of sit and think about a job at the time. And I think financially, I had prepared myself that
mm,
I would have no income for the first two terms.
mhm,
Term three and four, as part of the program, when things became a little bit more settled down, I felt more comfortable. But as part of the business
mm,
school program, there were always these internship sort of opportunities. So I was very lucky. What
right.
happened during my summer break, I got an internship,
Mm,
and that internship paid pretty much quite well. And they were
mm,
very happy for me after the internship to actually work during for, I would say, 20 hours as well. So I was very lucky. I would say that
okay.
now that I look at that time, I took it for granted. But then when I heard about other people's stories around finding work or finding work on a student visa, I can only thank I would say, lucky stars, because I was very lucky. I kind of from term three onwards, I was working, and it kind of gave me the
Mm.
job which I needed to kind of be able to fund my living expenses.
And after you finished your studies,
Yes.
did you have a visa to continue to live here and work?
Yes, so that again, that research I had done prior to moving to Australia was the fact that because I was already a qualified chartered accountant, I had enough points to be able to go to a permanent residency visa at the time, because accountants were in the skilled migration list. So what I did was, in the first 2 or 3 months of landing in Australia, I applied for my permanent residency, worked with a visa lawyer like yourself at the time. I took the assistance of a visa lawyer, and I would highly recommend that to anyone as well, is because the system is very complex. It constantly changes all the time, and I did not want to take any risk of doing it myself. I just thought engaging a professional who understood the system, could keep me updated, would be very valuable. So I engaged with a visa lawyer, with a migration lawyer, provided all my certificates, documentation, put that application through. And then I was told at the time it was like a 12-month process to get permanent residency at the time. So in my case, it worked out really well, because this 1 month before I graduated, I got my residency.
Right. So it took about a year and something in
I would say
those.
15 months, 15 months, I would say. So because my MBA program, I remember, was 18 months. And 1 month prior to my MBA program getting over, I already had my residency. So when I
So you were
graduated,
lucky
yeah,
that you got your PR just before you graduated. And I
absolutely
think
very
in
lucky.
those and in I think in those days there were no post-study work visa. So what happened to your colleagues who did not have a PR? Do you know whether they stayed or they went back and applied?
I think of I think there were people like me and as you can imagine, if you're doing an MBA, you attract a certain type of, I would say, person as well. So a lot of people I knew who were coming from the subcontinent had done their research. They all knew how to kind of get the points. So some people
Hmm.
did go and kind of look for additional points by doing that language translation course. I think if you kind of had if you did one of those, I would say, NATI courses, if I remember, that's what it was to be called, you could get an
Hmm.
additional 10 points. So people did try during that 12 to 18-month period, to, if there were any gaps for their points, to try and get those additional
Right.
points. And a lot of my uni mates did manage to get their PR I think within like during the program or just after the program, I think a few of them did go on to some sort of bridging visa if they didn't get it, or they went to New Zealand for some time. I don't know. There was some way
Okay.
to kind of be able to do it. I don't remember exactly how they did it.
Right,
But the
right.
ones who were clearly not able to get the points, they definitely did go back. So that was, but I think they were mentally prepared with that as well. They knew it when they arrived in the
Yeah.
country and they realized,
So I think now the situations are better
hmm,
because all the students who study here for 2 years, they can get onto post-study work visa for 2 years.
wow,
During that
amazing.
period, they have work rights, they get work experience, and then they can use that period to apply for PR.
That's amazing,
So,
Amitava. That wasn't there at the time, and I think it's great that people have this opportunity now. At least it gives them some time to really kind of give them an opportunity, a good opportunity to try and live in Australia. Then
and when did you become a citizen?
I became a citizen 4 years after my residency, so I became a citizen in 2008.
Right. And how do you feel about that, being an Australian citizen?
Oh, wow. How do I feel as an Australian citizen? I feel very, I would say, privileged because the Australian passport does open up so many opportunities for you in terms of if you want a global career. So much easier to travel when you're going on holidays, so much easier to travel, not having to apply for multiple visas.
Hmm.
And I think I've also heard that if you're an Australian sort of, I would say, citizen, you can, like, I've heard this, not that I was ever interested, but you could actually, there are a lot of other developed countries like the US and the UK and all provide a special sort of consideration for Australians who want to go and live and work in those countries.
E3
So
visas, yes,
yeah,
for
so
US.
it's a great passport. If your
Hmm.
future desire is to go to another country, the Australian passport can benefit if you think about it in a structured manner. Not
And
that
you can still have your OCI,
and you
right?
still have your OCI. Exactly. I applied for my OCI, so you can still retain your India connection. And yeah, you're right.
Adil,
Hmm.
how did you find that citizenship process?
Pretty straightforward to be honest, Irene. Like it was pretty
Quite
straightforward.
easy, or because
Very.
you had to answer questions, did you?
Yes, so
They
if I
asked.
remember correctly, I had to do like an online test. Then there was an
Mm.
interview. I had to go for an interview, like 10-minute interview or 15-minute interview, and that was it.
Oh, good, good. And your parents are now residents here, are they?
They are. My parents are also residents in Australia. Yes, very happy to have them here.
And were there any challenges with bringing them over?
Oh, wow. Where do we start?
Ah,
Let's open up that can of worms. No, I would not say that. I think in Australia, one thing I've realized, if you follow the process and you just stick to the rules, outcomes will happen. That is, I have always trusted the Australian system to get me the outcomes if I follow the rules. This Indian concept of what we call jugaad doesn't work in Australia. Like trying to do shortcuts doesn't work. And that's one of my key things which I realized living in Australia. Like, don't rush it, just follow the rules and the systems, and you will get the outcomes. That's been my experience. Now, I know people will say people have their own experiences, but my experience has been that. So even with my parents, it was again the fact that what I did was my parents, being an only child, it was important for me that I could be close to my parents. So my parents, after I became a permanent resident and became quite clear that I'm going to be living in Australia for the foreseeable future, they started visiting Australia quite regularly in the initial years. And that gave them an opportunity to really see what this country was all about, what life over here could be like. And then we thought about the future and we said, like, so we as a family had to have a conversation and say, what would happen as they grow old, if I decide never to come back to India and things like that. And so my parents were, I have to give full credit to my parents for thinking long term. And they said, you know what? At least let us apply for a parent visa. Whether we come here or not is a different thing. So at the time, there was this normal parent visa which you could apply for, which had a waiting time of 9 years at the time. So I applied for my parents. After I became a citizen, I applied for my parents in 2009 and I got into the visa queue, as they call it. I was lucky because we'd done forward thinking. So because my parents at the time were like, you know what, we're not ready to come now. We are still they were relatively younger at that time. They had their own lives over there. They were able to travel frequently. Tourist visa was not a problem. I was also traveling back and forth, so there wasn't that urgency around it. We could have paid a lot of money and got them here earlier, but they were like, we don't see the urgency right now. If we need to do it, we will pay the money and pay with, like, there was a big sum of money which you have to pay to bring people, to be able to bring your parents here within like a 18 to 24-month period. But they were not ready for that. They said we'll exercise that option when required. So we just put them in the normal parent visa category, which is a 9-year wait. And lo and behold, exactly at the 9-year mark, I get an email from the immigration body saying, we are ready to finalize your parents' visa application. Are you still keen to proceed? So that happened in 2018. So not exactly later, 9 years down the
Do
track.
you want a bit of comparison? So in those days, you had 9 years and two years, right? 9 years for the normal visa,
Correct.
2 years
Yes.
for contributory parent visa, and now contributory parent visa takes 9 years,
Wow.
and the normal parent visa takes 50 years. That's because of the number of migrants, and especially from
Wow,
India,
Amitava, that
who
is
want to
some
bring their
crazy
parents.
stats over there. And I think I can only say that if people are thinking about it, plan ahead. Don't
So
leave
now
it to the
things are
last
going to
minute.
change. They're going to make it easier for parents.
Oh,
Something is going
good.
to change.
That is good. That is good to hear that. I think it kind of makes sure, I think if Australia is keen to retain its best people and best talent, especially coming from societies where family ties are very critical, which I think is true for many people, I think that's a good move by the Australian government to try and make sure that you can bring your family here, because that family structure means you kind of further put your roots down in Australia and don't think of leaving the country.
How hard was it for your parents to adapt to life in Sydney?
Okay. I think because my parents had been coming here as tourists quite regularly. So my parents, the minute I became resident, and they used to visit each year. So it was like every year they would come and spend anywhere between 1 to 3 months, even prior to making the decision to come and live in Australia. I was very lucky enough that I had integrated myself really well. I had a good circle of friends and, so social connections. So they had a ready-made social network to lean into as well. So that the foundation was there. Like we had a house and things like that as well. So there was not like there was no transientness in my decision. Like, it is not that I'm being transient and I'm going to change my decision. So because I provided that sort of stability in terms of saying, I'm here, I've got everything ready for you, it gave them the confidence. Of course, that is like when you come as a tourist and all, it's when you have to do something for 3 months or 4 months, it's different from living here day to day. Having moved here to Australia, I permanently now, nearly 6 years ago now, I think we take each day as it comes sometimes, because like being here for a short period of time, you can have a tourist mindset and enjoy the country. When you have to start living by yourself here, run your own life and run your own house, it's a slightly different challenge, but I give full, I would say, credit to my parents that they've done, I think, really well in terms of adapting themselves to this country. And yes, they have their challenges like anybody else has, but nothing extraordinary difficult. It's more of a mindset more than anything else for them. It's like, and yeah, there are days when they feel like they want to, they they miss their family back in India, especially during the time of festivals and things like that. When you kind of remember how you used to celebrate it, you do it differently in Australia. Uh, and yeah, I think with the aging process, your life priorities change. So they have become very clear that their life priority is that they want to spend more time with me. Their health is their big focus in life, and the Australian healthcare system they find it to be fantastic. Again, I know people complain about everything in Australia when it comes to healthcare, but I think compared to where they have come from, the Australian healthcare system actually is very good for them. And very importantly, just the entire sort of standard of living in terms of the quality of air and the ability to go for a walk and breathe fresh air and oxygen. And in India it's polluted right now, and they just have, since living in Australia, they have hardly fallen sick. I can say that. When they were in India, they used to regularly fall sick with something, some sort of a viral infection, some sort of a respiratory infection. But in Australia, I think their health has been very good. So they kind of have said, you know what matters to us is health and being close to you. If those two things are happening in Australia, we will make it work.
So, what's your advice to someone who's looking to buy their first home here?
Oh, wow, first home. Number one, buy when you can, when you are able to afford it. Like just do it. Rather than overanalyzing the decision beyond a point. Recognize that your first home may not be your forever home because your life will change and you may upgrade, downgrade, do things like that. So it's something not to feel like, oh, this is a decision for the next rest of my life. It may be, but chances are it will not be. Chances are this is going to be this is going to be a home for the first 7 to 8 years in Australia. And see it as a forced, I would say, savings, because it's very hard sometimes to start the savings and the investing journey when you come to a new country. Buying your home and paying down a mortgage, building equity in your own in your own home is seen as a form of forced savings. So I would say, yeah, do it as soon as you can when you can afford to.
Now, earlier you did mention about when you moved to Australia, the culture, the change in culture that you spoke about, how you found everybody to be very, very relaxed, as opposed to the mindset back home where you had to address everyone by their title, or someone who is elder to you, give some reverence to them. But here you said everyone is just too chilled out. So, what should one keep in mind when they're trying to assimilate themselves into the society? Like, how can one make friends here, become more engaged with their community so that they feel at home very quickly?
I think the one way to make yourself feel at home very quickly. So some of the things which through my journey I can say, like like this may sound very controversial, but I consciously chose not to live in an area which was full of people of my community. So try not to go and live with your community, because otherwise, how are you going to get exposure to get exposure to a new culture? If you're surrounded by people of your community in your country all the time, yes, there is a lot of emotional benefit to it, but actually then you don't truly appreciate the new culture. You don't actually kind of really assimilate. So that would be one thing I would say is like try in the initial years, at least live in an area which is not where you're surrounded by people of your own community. You can do that later on once you've properly assimilated and appreciated other aspects of life. Secondly, be open-minded and curious. Like, do not come with any judgment. Like, just because somebody else, just because in Australia we may not have, just because the rest of the society in Australia may not subscribe to the same values when it comes to family, or values when it comes to how they raise their children, or the education system, or whatever. There's no right or wrong in these things. It's a personal choice. So recognize that. Thirdly, I sometimes say to a lot of people is like, you decided to come here. There's something you were unhappy about where you left. You trying to come here and then complain about things the way they are here. I find that very interesting, that people come and complain about the things which actually they have left behind. It's a little bit interesting that they complain about things which they were complaining about previously and want the same things again in Australia. So that's the third thing. And finally, I think the best way to assimilate yourself in this culture, which is what I did, was get into volunteering, volunteer time, join some organization. And, that way you'll get to meet people from different walks of life. You'll get to really see Australian society and I would say culture at in a different way. It's a good way to make new friends, build a social network. So I have been volunteering in different capacities pretty much all the 20 years that I've been here. It's part of my life. I do some sort of volunteering every weekend with some organization, with some cause which I care about.
What I have seen over the few years of being here is that the landscape has changed and it has become more multicultural. There are people from various countries, and of course, naturally, every person who is a first generation migrant
Mm-hmm.
naturally try to find their own kind, and
Mm.
they make a clan. So, what would be your advice to break that and make friends so that you are also, broadening our horizon? Of course, you need to have your own balance between where you come from and
Correct.
what you want to do.
Absolutely.
But you did mention volunteering. Yeah, that's a very good way to do that. What about meetup? There are all these meetup sessions. Do you have any advice on how people can make friends?
I think I tried different things. So for me, I found, I would say, volunteering as a way to kind of meet different people. Um, I kind of, I think to your point around meetup groups, I think at the time when I came, I don't think there was Meetup. I think Meetup came, maybe Meetup was like 10 years ago. Meetup started, I'm not sure. But yes, I have also been part of Meetup groups where I could go and participate with people who had similar interest to me. So for example, I enjoy playing badminton. So I'm part of a badminton meetup group, and I got to meet people from different parts of the world who enjoyed playing badminton, for example, to your point. So yeah, it can be a great way to meet people through meetup groups. I think there are lots of Facebook groups as well you can be part of. And I think Facebook is another way to kind of build your community. So I think it's about looking for, because the chances are that you may not find that your regular group of friends like to do everything what you want to do. So I think looking at your interests and hobbies and then trying to challenge yourself in that side and say, you know what, can I go and experience this hobby or do my hobby with not my normal group of friends who may not actually enjoy it, and find people who are really like-minded in that regard. And you'd be really sort of surprised as to how that can build, I would say, in terms of new friends and connections. So you can retain your
Okay.
heritage in terms of your identity from a food perspective or religion and things like that. But when it comes to interests and hobbies, maybe you can challenge yourself.
I agree.
So, what are some of your favorite things to do here?
Oh, favorite things to do. So I'm lucky enough to live in a beachside, I would say, suburb. So I'm not a water baby, but I love going and just taking a walk by the beach. It is one of my favorite things to do. Was really it's part of my routine. I'm a bit of a foodie, so the fact that in Australia we have such a diverse population, and we have amazing sort of produce and different cuisines. I love trying different cuisines. And thirdly, just enjoy the lifestyle. Like, I think we underappreciate how much this lifestyle is about. Just like underappreciate the lifestyle which Australia gives me. So at times I just sit back and chill and relax, and that's good.
You are a partner with the firm Own Financial Planning, based in Sydney. Tell us a bit about your firm and what you guys do there.
Okay. So yeah, Own Financial Planning is a goals-based financial planning firm. And by that, what I mean is that we help people to use money to create their best life. So our focus is on understanding, what do you want to do with your money? What sort of life do you wish to lead? What are your goals linked to that? And for everybody, it means different things. And there'll be life goals, and most things in life need money. Let's put it that way. Money by itself is not the final outcome, but money gives you choices to actually have the experiences you want to have, to be able to give you freedom of time or whatever you want to do. So our focus at Own Financial Planning is really helping, what we call it, using money to design your best life, and then providing a holistic service which caters to different aspects of your money, which is things like advice on managing cash flow, budgeting, your superannuation, tax planning, how to invest, buying your first home, buying an investment property if that is right for you, or buying shares if that may be right for you. So really taking a holistic view of your money, but with the intention not just to kind of invest for the sake of it or save for the sake of it or chase the highest return, but to chase your goals. Let's use your money to chase goals and not returns, because those things are not controllable. You give people financial strategies to link to their goals, and you kind of go from there.
And your final thoughts and advice to people who are thinking to make the move to Australia?
Okay. Okay. My thoughts and advice to people thinking making the move to Australia now, I think, is be prepared for the initial struggle. It's not going to be easy. I have not heard of anybody who comes here and within the first 3 to 6 months is like, yay, it's all perfect. It won't be perfect. You will have struggles in different aspects. You don't even know what the struggles might be. So be prepared to struggle. But yeah, the initial struggle period, be prepared for that. Be prepared for that financially and emotionally, I would say. Like, be prepared on both elements of it. It can cause there can be a lot of emotional toil when you are struggling.
Aadil, with that struggle, Did you find you had support groups that helped you through it?
I think at that time, because I was at uni, being with a group of international students and migrants at the time was very helpful because they could relate to your challenges. So my support network was my uni mates, all of them who also were overseas students. So that really was useful. I did not have any community sort of support group which I relied upon. It was my uni mates. So the initial, I think be prepared for the struggle. Second thing which I realized very quickly, because I came to Australia having had some work experience, having had qualifications, I had to put my ego aside because what I had done previously, for some reason, did not matter here. A lot of people want local experience, understanding of local culture. So put your ego aside and try and find a way to kind of do things which you need to do to kind of get local experience. It may not be linked to your past qualification, your skills. Just give it a go. Just give it a go. Do something to start actually assimilating at that level. And thirdly, I think my personal experience has been just work hard, be fair, and you'll be right. She'll be right.
Right. On that note, Aadil, thank you for your time. It was wonderful talking to you, mate.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
Thank
and
you.
maybe we can do this in the
Really,
future
it was a
again.
very interesting chat for me because I had to go back and reflect on my own journey for 20 years, which I haven't done.
Yep.
So thank you for the opportunity to
So
reflect.
was it emotional, the going back journey
It was, I
over
think
these years?
it is definitely emotional right now. As I'm talking as well, there are emotions that you think which emotions are flowing through. But I think there's a sense of, these are positive emotions. There's a sense of achievement. There's a sense of gratitude. There's a grand sense of thankfulness. And I think validating the fact that I think the decision which I made 20 years ago, I have made it work and I have achieved something. I've created my own identity and being able to kind of forge a life here in Australia, which if you'd asked me 20 years ago, I would have said, I don't know, or no way.
So all the best.
Thanks for sharing a big part of your life and wish you well.
Thank you, Arun. Thank you, Irene. Thank you, Amitava.
Thanks, Irene.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Amitava. Have a good day.
Cheers.
Cheers. Bye.